So Trump seems like he wants to go around calling Hillary Clinton weak. It's an attempt to frame her, of course, but it's kind of ridiculously arrogant for Donald Trump to think that he can frame Hillary Clinton, right? Good luck with that, Donald. In fact, Trump will lose if he uses this tactic. The popular perception is in line with the objective facts. Not only is Clinton not weak on foreign policy, but she's a very frightening hawk who will start multiple wars. The fear with Clinton is not that she's too weak, it's that she's far too strong. She's not the kind of person that you want in charge of delicate situations, because she has a tendency to just strong-arm her way through everything, like a bull in a china shop. He's just making himself sound very stupid. Again, marketing is powerful to a certain segment of the population that Trump has managed to take strong control of. And you can frame issues to a certain level. It's all. I mean, I'm not debating this, but there's certain things that you can't frame, no matter how hard you try, right? So the sky. The sky changes different. It changes colors, but you're never going to see the sky brown. Okay, you might see it. You might see it green. You might see it orange. You might see it red. You'll never see it brown. Okay, and in fact, you'll see it gray. The amount of time that the sky is blue is actually not. It'll be blue sometimes, but I mean, if you would actually measure it, it would likely not even come in at a majority of the time. Perhaps a plurality, but nonetheless, trying to argue that the sky is brown is not going to win you votes. You can run all the TV stations, you can control all the media pundits. You're never going to convince people that the sky is brown. Okay. And that's just kind of a silly example to get my point across. You're never going to convince people that Clinton is weak on foreign policy. It's ridiculous. Okay. It's the most absurdly obvious losing strategy that you can imagine. And what it does is it exposes the truth that I think that all intelligent pundits could see very clearly. Trump did not win due to any brilliance on his own behalf, but he managed to watch a succession of people defeat themselves. The person that Trump reminds me of the most is Stephen Harper, because we went through this with him. Okay? He watched the liberals destroy themselves over and over again, and then he got all the credit for it. When in truth he could have been beaten the whole time by a smart teenager. It just happened to be that the people he was running against were singularly incompetent over and over again. Okay, you can say what you want about Hillary Clinton, but she's not incompetent. At least not like that. And this idea that you can define her at all. Okay, like she's been in the front of the political universe for 30 years. You think you're going to define her as weak? Like I say, it just makes him look stupid. Very, very stupid. There's lots of things you can hit Hillary on that are real. And you can probably win an election against her if you hit her on them. Okay? But this idea that you can manipulate reality and you can try to convince people of things that are not true, you can't do that with Hillary Clinton. Okay? She's far too well known. You can win in West Virginia that way. And if this is his tactic, it might be the only state he wins. That said, I think that Trump will win if he runs as an anti-war candidate with strong libertarian leanings. In fact, I will go so far as stating the following. The Republicans will not win another presidential election until they run a libertarian candidate, meaning that this is the exact wrong approach. If the Republicans want to win, they don't want to run another Bush. That's why Trump won, right? The reality is that trying to run to the right of Clinton is a very narrow path. Okay? That's what you're seeing come up here. Everybody, the party, the media establishment, everybody's trying to push Trump to her right to maintain the system that exists. I'm going to change my battery. I'll be back in a sec. So I'm going to tell you an anecdote. This is somewhere back in my writings from sometime last year, or maybe even the year before now. I was watching the White House press conference with Pretty Boy Josh there, and they were talking about how Obama was lax on immigration. And the journalist was just nailing Pretty Boy Josh about how, the Obama administration was, not doing anything to stop the flow of illegal immigrants, how, they were overturning the border, and it was just this, love fest of the Obama administration with, not following the law and just letting people come into the country without any checks and balances at all. And I just remember watching it and thinking, this person has no concept of reality. Because in fact, the Obama administration has been harsher on migrants than any other administration in history. They've deported millions of people. Okay, this is the what do they call it? The ICE that they set up, the bureaucracy has quotas that have to be hit. There have been reports of United States citizens being deported because they look Mexican. Okay, it's been a human rights disaster. They have giant concentration camps on the border. It's horrible. And you have journalists pounding the same talking points that they pounded 30 years ago, and just not at all interested in what the evidence actually states. Okay? And I learned something by watching that exchange, which is that it does not matter how right-wing the Democrats swing, the media narrative will never change. The corporations that control the mainstream media set up these buckets of positions. Sometime in the early part of the Reagan administration, around 1980. Okay, and the parties are not allowed to change from the media definition of what they are. Meaning we live in a reality where political parties do not define themselves, okay, but have no option but to be defined by the media. Because the media wants to define the story in such a way that it thinks can sell the most. And so it doesn't matter how harsh the Democrats are on migrants. It doesn't matter how many human rights they break. It doesn't matter how many comparisons they get to the Gestapo. Okay? The media will continue to present the Democrats as soft on immigration. And I think that this is a big part of what you're seeing and how they're trying to define Trump. And you can define Trump. Okay? Nobody's going to define Hillary Clinton except herself, and the positions that she's put down in the public sphere for decades where they exist, right? Now, in a real sense, what that means is that she's an opportunist, right? And she's defined herself that way. And that's what people understand her as. But what it means is that there's no way that anybody else is going to define her. She's, she will strong arm him through any attempts of that, right? But the media can define Trump. In fact, anybody at all has the ability to define Trump because he doesn't have that. What he has is this widespread and probably mostly correct perception that he's a pathological liar, that is essentially a psychopath, and will just say whatever he feels like. He'll say one thing on Monday, another thing on Tuesday, and the definition of him is clear as day and valid, and he's not going to get out of that, right? In a sense, he has already been defined. And he's already been defined. He's been defined by Twitter, okay? And he's not going to get out of that. In a sense, they're both, and you see this in their public, polling numbers, right? And their unfavorables. They're both seen as opportunistic liars, okay? But at least Clinton is seen as a consistent opportunistic liar, right? So she'll pretend that she opposes the TPP until the end of the election cycle, right? When she takes a position, she holds to it until, she gets elected, right? She won't flop in the middle of an election. She won't flop in the middle of a week, right? She'll stick to it. But everybody knows that it's not real, right? Everybody knows she's full of shit. She thinks she's fooling people, but she's not. She's not fooling anybody, right? People are voting for her because she supports the TPP, right? Anybody that's opposed to the TPP is voting against her because they know she supports it. She's not fooling anybody, right? But that's just it, is you know exactly where she is in a meta sense, right? With Trump, you really don't know where he is, but you know that he'll say whatever he feels like on that specific day, right? And he'll just flop all over the place, right? But that leaves him open to the ability to be defined, whereas she's beyond any attempts like this, right? And I think that that's what you're seeing here over the last couple of weeks, and you're going to see this continue more and more, is that they're trying to push her to the right of Clinton to ensure that the orientation of the parties remains consistent. The media will not allow him to run to her right, nor will it allow her to run to his right. Sorry, I think I said that wrong. I've noticed, watching over these, I will often misspeak and not catch it. It's typical nerdery. Nerds do that all the time, right? But let's be clear with this, because I want to get this right. The media will not allow him to run to her left, is what I meant to say the whole time. And I think that's clear from context. And the media will not allow her to run to his right, even though I think that that's what they both want to do. Okay? And they can put statements out, they can do this and that and that. At the end of the day, the media will report on his right-wing topics, and the media will report on her left-wing topics. Because that's the narrative that they want. Reality doesn't really mean anything to the networks. That's a big part of the reason why people aren't watching the networks anymore. But what it means is that if they are going to break, the status quo of where the parties are, they're going to have to get outside the networks. They're going to have to do it by going directly to people. Okay? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get him to run to her right. But the reality is that trying to run to the right of Clinton is such a narrow path that it's impossible. Okay? Which is why it's going to be her tactic. She doesn't want to just control the center, but she wants to, muscle him out of the way on the right. And she's going to try to muscle him right off onto the curb. And that's going to be really hard for him to fight back against, because she's not just smarter than him. She won't just, outsmart him, beat him with the brains. She'll beat him with sheer force. She'll beat him with brawn, because she's got bigger arms too. And if he does let her do this, if he allows this narrative to set itself up to define him, then she's going to body slam him right into the ditch. Because there's just not enough space for someone to try to run on the right of Hillary Clinton. It's such a narrow path. And he'll have to do it so awkwardly that body slam is going to knock him right out. And it'll be just one knock. Okay? She won't even have to hit him hard. Because he's got like a tightrope worth of space in there, right? And this is what the popular reading of the election is, right? This is what everybody's saying. She'll get 65% of the vote and win all the red states by presenting herself as a more reasonable and more moderate conservative. While he sputters out with gun nuts and kooky nationalists, because that's all that exists to the right of Hillary Clinton. It's crazy people. She herself is on the border of crazy right wing and acceptable right wing. If he's going to run to her right, he will have no audience except for crazy people, because that's all there is there. And he's just not strong enough to push back. She's got the establishment and the media on her side. If she starts pushing him to the right, it's a losing fight. She will crush him like a bug. See, and that's what none of the Republican Party candidates did. Okay? What they did instead was they pushed him into the center. They all ran to the right of him. And all they can get was the crazy people. Because that's all there is. And so he won the Republican primary by being moderate. What he should learn from that is that the only way he's going to have a chance in the general is also by being moderate. If he tries to swing out to the right and beat her on the right, the same thing will happen to him that happened to everybody that lost to him. And so what he's doing, by taking the advice of the Republican establishment, which is what he's doing now, is he's making the same mistake that all the people that he beat in the Republican primary made by taking the advice of the people that he's now taking advice from. Which again makes him look very stupid. He beats them all, and then he copies them after he beat them. And she's going to beat him in the same way that he beat all of them. Or at least that's what it looks like right now. But there is a way out of this for him. And it's to swing out and try and rally her left flank to mutiny. Okay? It's going to be hard for him to control the center for all the reasons I just said. You pretty much have to accept that she's going to control the center. So his choice is, does he want to try to get into into an arm wrestling fight over the right, which he'll lose? Or does he want to try to sneak out, run around her, and try to beat her on the left? That's the only way he'll ever beat her. Okay? Because the people out there are sick of watching her fight for votes on the right for the last 30 years. They know what side of the spectrum she's on. Okay? The left understands who Hillary Clinton is. And so they're not going to need a lot of convincing. They don't want to vote for her. They're gonna take any option they can get, because they can't stand her. Because they know exactly who she is, and exactly what she is, and exactly what she stands for, and exactly who she fights for. Okay? all they're going to need to vote for someone else is something halfway articulate and convincingly sane. Unfortunately, that's not a very good description of Donald Trump now, is it? It's a real tough sell. It's getting tougher every day. But if he can somehow find a way to make himself seem halfway articulate and convincingly sane, then he can beat her on the left. And he can, don't think he can't. I've pointed this out before. Okay, free trade is not just an issue, it's the issue. And if you were alive in the 90s, you know that. Where were all the protests? Where was the movement? It was all at the free trade gatherings. He can get basically the entire left on his side by fighting against these trade agreements if he does it in a way that people can believe him, and if he does it in such a way that is halfway articulate and convincingly sane, which means he's got to drop all the racist bullshit too, right? Or, xenophobic bullshit anyways. I don't really want to argue if it's racist or not. It's clearly xenophobic, right? And he's got to drop all that. Okay? Which means, why did he do it? Well, like I say, he's pushed himself onto this very, very, very thin path. You could say that he's worked his way into a corner. And he's just running along a tightrope on the very right side of, the acceptable spectrum. He's just on the very edge of it. And he's got to get off of it if he wants to win. If he stays on there, he might sputter around for a little while, but it's only going to take one knock to push him off the rail and off into the ditch. Just one, right? I think it may actually even be impossible for him to present himself as a halfway articulate and convincingly sane person. But he's got a bit of a secret weapon, I think. I think that that his daughter is actually halfway articulate and convincingly sane. That might be his only real chance, is to send his daughter off after the left-wing vote. He's not even gonna get a. He's not even gonna get a VP. Right? He's toxic. Everybody can see it. The idea that he's going to be able to convince somebody who's capable and articulate and sane to run with him, who's he going to find? Anybody that he does find is just going to completely unravel everything that he's been trying to do. So out of all the names that have been thrown around, the closest person to that description is Newt Gingrich. But then you're voting for, who's more establishment than Newt Gingrich? The representative from Lockheed Martin, right? So he's going to certainly have to, drop that in order to stay on message. And then he's the fringe of the fringe, right? And that's going to be the outcome. It's pretty clear. Which is why this whole argument about Sanders is flawed. I don't see how Trump can get to 40%. I really don't. I've said some various things about this and that. Clearly Sanders is the stronger candidate, And if Clinton does lose, then who's going to be responsible? It's the Democratic Party. But, there may be a little bit of drama there. Reality is, I don't see how he wins anywhere. For the simple reason that she's able to take so much of the center away from him. And the more he talks, the crazier he sounds, right? If it was the other way around, if the more he talked, the more convincing he was, then he'd have a chance on the left by pushing some of these policies, by running as an anti-war candidate, etc. And if he can find a way to, do that facelift with his image, and like I said, I think his daughter is probably his best chance, then, those votes on the left are there. They don't want to vote for Clinton anyways, that's for sure. And if he can find a way to get them to make a choice between Jill Stein and Donald Trump, he might get a couple of them. If he can define that way, right? There's only one major candidate that's opposed to NAFTA, and it's, like if he set it up that way, he's going to get some votes there. And the left, the Democrats should blame themselves for taking such a pro-corporate position. We should not shed tears for the Democrats losing when they take these positions like this, right? But if he can't do that, he's going to get bludgeoned. I mean, the argument is that if you run Sanders, then that it's not even there. If you run Sanders, then you can't even get those people, right? Because he has the populist positions on these things. And so if the left gets what they want, he might get a little more in the center, but at the very least he doesn't win, right? So with Sanders, it's a high probability that he'll win, but he might win with, 55% of the vote. With Clinton, it's a lower probability that she wins, but if she does win, she probably wins by a larger margin. If you pick Sanders, you can be at least certain that the party will win. If you pick Clinton, it's not as clear, but it doesn't matter, right? It's the electoral collage. Whether you get 65% of the vote or 55% of the vote doesn't matter, right? But if he can figure this out, it flips around the other way. But I don't think that's likely. I think that what's more likely is that she does win in Missouri. She wins in Arkansas. She wins in Tennessee. Puts up a fight in Indiana. Wins in Utah, Georgia. Because at the end of the day, these steady, careful, conservative thinkers, and that's the entire South isn't West Virginia, right? We can be certain that Trump will win in West Virginia. That's absolutely certain, okay? But the rest of the South, they're not all cretins, right? Just because I don't agree with them doesn't mean they're stupid. And they're going to sit down and they're going to say, who is the careful, steady hand here? It sure ain't Donald Trump. And that's exactly what she's going to do. She's going to expand from the center into the right. And so long as he stays on that, razor thin string line path, he's going to have nowhere to go but off into the ditch. When she, shrugs, she flexes. She's not even going to have the body slam him. She could just blow him. That sounded very terrible. Blow on him. And have him fall over. And he's not helping himself by shrinking the amount of space that he has to run in. And by repeating the same errors that the Republican establishment made to have him elected in the first place. So yeah, if he thinks he's gonna convince people that that Clinton is weak on foreign policy, it's a good laugh. Huh?